A side was kind of a folded out book match. I can't remember the name for that veneer. Brian, maybe you can help me out on that. What
Brian's
that
big into
veneer.
I know. He's got veneer all over his place. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Contributing Editor and Production Manager for TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
Hello.
Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Hey everyone.
And producer Andres Samaniego. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, as always, it is great to see you guys this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Ian, you sent us some photos of your evolving kitchen a few days ago. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing there?
Yeah, we finally managed to build the kitchen. We're calling it a landmass instead of an island because of its size. My wife's actually taken to calling it Madagascar, which I think is pretty funny. I think I spoke about the design of it probably a year-ish ago on the podcast, and I think we might have put up my SketchUp model of it. I remember Mike was on that episode, and we were talking about how to execute it. But we hosted a lot of family for the holidays, and I got this idea back in November. Hey, I should do that project. That'd be pretty awesome to have done for the holidays. And I think I was sanding the butcher block countertop down at like 8 o'clock in the evening the day before the party. So I consider that to be done.
You were ahead of schedule, if I could offer.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Had a schedule. But so we built this kitchen island that's 3 feet wide by 10 feet long, and it kind of matches up with the alcove that the stove and the cabinets surrounding the stove are in. And it creates a kind of a nice working space in the kitchen, being the large butcher block counter. My wife, being a chef, likes to just throw stuff down on the counter and start chopping it up without being encumbered by having to protect the counter. So spent a lot of time on it. I think I've maybe got like 160 hours in it by now over the last couple of months. So
it's fair to say the comparison to a landmass seems appropriate. You must have built this in place because it's got to weigh hundreds of pounds, right?
Yeah, so I built it in sections. So the back section, which faces out into the dining space where it's divided out for storing fancy pots and pans and glassware, that's one section. And then I built that to be attached to the back of the basic front cabinets. And then I built the side cabinets, which also house a wine fridge and a beverage fridge on the dining room side independently. So it's really 4 different pieces that I put together, got it together, and then put the countertop on it, and then built out all the drawers for it.
It's beautiful. In round numbers, what do you think you've spent on this?
So in round numbers, I'm at about $4,500 in cost. On my end, I decided to use walnut plywood for a lot of it, which ran me about $350 a sheet. I was pretty impressed with the quality of it for $350 a sheet, so that didn't bother me too much when I got that. But it's an MDF core. One side of it was an A grade, and the other was kind of a B grade slip matched veneer, where the A side was kind of a folded out book match. I can't remember the name for that veneer. Brian, maybe you can help me out on that.
Brian's big into veneer. I know. He's got veneer all over his place.
And then otherwise, it's a fair amount of walnut hardwood lumber, and then I used the matrix drawer kits from Hafele, which I really like. They have metal sides with integrated slides on them, and then all you have to do is put the drawer face on it, the drawer back, and then the drawer bottom, and they go together pretty quick.
Do you like them for their speed of assembly, or are there some other attributes beyond that?
It's really speed of assembly and the fact that you can make them out to any size. So because you put the drawer bottom in, the face and the back yourself, if you need a 37-inch wide drawer like I did for 2 of the drawer sets, that's not a big deal. And then it's the same package of goods that can get you a 2-foot wide drawer or a 30-inch wide drawer, depending on whatever you need. So I like the flexibility of it. And you do the math problem once, and that's all you need to do.
They also look great, I would add. It's just a really sleek, high-quality look.
Yeah, the fine woodworking folks would thumb their nose at them, but that doesn't bug me. I don't have time to hand-cut dovetail drawers anymore.
Well, and frankly, for a working kitchen, that's not the right option anyway, because you need full extension, and they need to be easy to open and quiet and all weather. Yeah. So, speaking of fine kitchens, Brian, can I guess that you have a built-in similar to the beautiful island that Ian has built?
We actually have a plan. In our plan for our kitchen, we had a small island, and we have not yet installed the island, and I'm not sure if we will actually. The only reason that I would install the island at this point is because, like Ian's wife, I would love to have a butcher's block top to just for all the chopping that I do. I think that I've never had that, and I think I would really love it. I'm the cook in the house. I'm not really looking for more counter space than I have, but that would be a nice convenience. And so a small island with a butcher's block top is something that I will perpetually consider, and maybe someday I will do it. Kind of a bit of a different approach in our house to the kitchen. When we got down to kitchen cabinets and trim, that was all that was left to do in the house. I was taking a look at the budget and the money we'd spent, and there was still money left in the budget, and we certainly could have spent more money than we did on our kitchen. But I didn't want to move into the house with no money left. I wanted to plant some trees the next spring, do some landscaping. I knew there was going to be I need to outfit closets with shelves. I wanted to be able to still do that stuff once we got into the house and just not be broke. So I decided I was going to build the most budget kitchen that I possibly could. And I built our whole kitchen, not including obviously appliances, the sink and the faucet. I built our kitchen for $1,500. The only thing I bought that was of good quality are the drawer slides and the hinges. I spend money on, Bloom, soft close, full extension, everything. And because I think that, that's important to how everything operates and the quality of the doors and the adjustability and all that stuff. But I used AC plywood. I hid the C sides and showed the A sides. I exposed the edges of the plywood where it looked nice. I did a laminate counter, one laminate on top of doubled up AC plywood, so that we have that exposed edge, so that theme continues around the kitchen. And I cut out the pulls for the drawers in the doors. I made cutouts in the drawer fronts and in the doors, and I softened the edges with a round over bit and did a lot of sanding with a little tool that I made to sand these circular and rectangular cutouts, and everything. We're loving it. I look at the big doors, and I think they've warped as much as they're going to. There's this. I made some pretty big drawers in this one part where we kind of have a pantry, and if I sight down them, I can see that they've bowed. They've become a little bit concave, but you have to really stand on the side of them and sight down it to see that. I think it's about as far as it's going to go. I did everything with glues and screws. So like Ian's kitchen, the fine woodworking crowd wouldn't be patting me on the back for this one. But I love it. I love the look. If I had more money, I might have done the same look with a little bit higher quality plywood. If I wasn't concerned about saving money, I might look exactly the same, because I really do love the way it looks. There's some creativity in in it, trying to figure out how to create a look on a good look on a budget, a fun look on a budget. And I have a backsplash to do. I haven't done anything yet with, right now the counters just butt up against the wall. I just kind of scribed them to the wall so that it's a clean look. But I do not want to have drywall backsplash in the kitchen. It's, the backsplash does get messy and you're constantly scrubbing the paint and that just leaves marks. And so I am going to do a tile backsplash at some point, probably in the spring or summer.
Give me a call. I'll help you with that.
Awesome.
Andres, you've been away to Vermont. What have you been doing?
We rented a cabin up in Wilmington, Vermont, and we spent like the whole week there. So I just got back a few days ago. I've been
Did
spending
you
it
like
with my
the
family.
rustic living of cabin life, or were you missing your nice kitchen and stuff?
No, I did like it. This is the second year we do this, so it's become a tradition for us to rent cabins and going up there. Next year we might do Maine. We're not too sure.
Did you have any snow in Vermont, or was it like here?
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
Our plan was to go to Stratton and do some snowboarding and skiing, but it just has so happened to be like 47 degrees and we couldn't find any snow.
Yeah, it's a weird winter for sure.
Yeah.
I took advantage of our holiday break at the AIM for a punch list, a bunch of annoying little projects that I had accumulated over at least 10 years, and I banged them all out over the days off we had, and it was fantastic. My favorite project, though, was not even on my punch list, and it's a pull-out drawer for my fasteners. I have a couple pack-out Milwaukee's organizers mounted on a drawer bottom, and you can pull them out and access them all and not have to move anything. It's fantastic. And the best part is it's all made out of stuff I had lying around, scraps and some drawer slides I had. So you guys know that scratches all my itches to be able to make something useful out of what would otherwise be clutter. So that was pretty cool.
Patrick, I did a similar project with scraps that was satisfying recently, which was to simply build. I have a nice big work table in my basement, 4x8 work table, work surface, but I haven't had a good outfeed situation for a table saw. So I was looking around in the shop area and I noticed I got all these scraps laying here. So I just took some measurements and built a nice solid table that puts the table saw at the table of the table saw at the same height as my work table. So now I have this 4x8 outfeed behind my table saw. I built it from scrap. It gave me a place to mount a power strip for all the corded tools that I use around the and battery chargers that I use around the workbench. And really simple, some 2x4s, some plywood, and super satisfying to now be able to use the table saw with much more ease.
I can tell you the virtue of improving a workspace with simple, often scrap-built fixtures was instilled in me at Habitat, where oftentimes 30 or 40 volunteers comes in like a pack of wild animals. And if you can spend 15 or 20 minutes ahead of their arrival hanging stuff up and organizing it with scraps or whatever, it goes a long way to make the day more productive and enjoyable for everybody. And it also sets this tone that, like, no, this isn't a disaster area. There's some thought that went into the work that's going on here. So it trickles down even after you make that effort to everyone else's helping to keep the place in order. I'm guessing, Ian, in your work, within 5 minutes if you show up on a job site if it's being managed well or not. Am I right?
Yeah, they start to get the same sort of look after a while, at least setup-wise and organization-wise.
Do you think that's time well spent? I'm guessing you do.
Yeah, I think oftentimes the default for a lot of people is just to kind of drop stuff and leave stuff where it lays. But if you get 4 or 5 people, or if you're at Habitat, like you said, and you start having things just strewn about, that's not very efficient, nor is it safe even.
Safety is a huge factor. Oh my gosh, and I just love being able to set stuff down without clutter and things in the way and a shelf to put stuff on. It's great. Good
Patrick,
for your brain.
If it paid enough, I would definitely take a job as job site cleanup and organization. I find it so satisfying. I'm actually, I think I might be a little overzealous in that category. I've definitely worked with some carpenters who have been annoyed at me for putting things away too soon. So I see it laying there and I put it away, and they knew they were going to use it in an hour, but I didn't like the way it was laying on the floor.
I've been, challenged by that too, Brian. I wasn't done with that. Oh my gosh. As always, we heard from our great listeners, and thank you all for your emails that include questions and feedback on the show. It makes the show so much better. I greatly appreciate it. We all do. And in regular conversations about the Fine Homebuilding brand, we talk about the engaged listeners of the podcast, and you all do an amazing job, and I thank you very much. This comes from Jim. FHB podcaster is not sure of which episode, but Mike G was lamenting the beautiful illustrations in Fine Homebuilding that indicate airflow in an HVAC system with red and blue arrows to illustrate the obvious. Short conversation ensued about how the reality is often not close to the fantasy that these arrows indicate. In my residential control system work, we often are called on to integrate functions of the HVAC system, ERV and HRV systems, and we see a lot of builds in our work around the country. A few comments here. First is that in general, most systems get designed between the drive from Dunkin' Donuts to the HVAC supply house. Even if it is the rare project fortunate enough to have a mechanical design, many contractors will stray from it in order to get the job done. No 24 by 12 inch trunk line at the stock at the supply house? No problem, we'll take the 18 by 12 instead. No 2-ton condenser available? Fine, we'll take the 3-ton. Second is that I rarely see HVAC contractors doing any sort of testing other than confirming the equipment is making hot or cold air. Hardly ever do we see test plugs on HRV ductwork indicating balancing of the system. We never see plugs checking airflow over the coil, the delta T, CFM at each register, anything. I know there are competent contractors out there, but with so many moving parts in the HVAC trade, the rule of thumb generally is to install it and assume it works and then wait for the callback. Third, and this is in a general comment about topics I hear on the podcast, is that if it can be designed, then it can be tested. So back to Mike's comment about the magic arrows. If a project gets an HVAC design done, why not go to the small extra effort to make sure that when it is commissioned, that the performance of the system matches the original design? What's the point of a design if you can't confirm the system is installed as designed? This challenge falls into the same hole as the whose responsibility is the bath fan ducting discussion. Does the mechanical engineer verify his design at commissioning as part of their service? Good idea. Does the HVAC contractor certify their performance based on the design? Not a good idea. Does the blower door audit guy perform this function? The design then test concept doesn't scale into all aspects of home building. For instance, if you're building in San Francisco, there isn't a practical means to test the seismic tie downs in the framing, but there are means to verify that things are done correctly if you care. Unfortunately, most consumers don't have the industry knowledge and are relying on the city inspectors, general contractors, and tradespeople to be protecting their investment and safety. Keep up the great topics, Jim. Jim, that is a fantastic email. Thank you for that. What do you guys think?
I think most mechanical engineers are not located within a easy driving distance of their projects, and a lot of times there isn't the $5,000 to $10,000 left in a project to have them come and actually do this testing if you're going to pay the mechanical engineer to do it.
Even in your projects, Ian, with let's call it upper income clients.
Well, on the one project that we're doing now, we used Mark Rosenbaum, and you know where he lives versus where I live, and we're not flying him out to do the commissioning and the test on a project that's was wildly over the original budget. So we have to rely on the mechanical contractor to install it as designed with the spec'd equipment.
I'm guessing that your ongoing relationship with your, HVAC contractor and your other subs, does ensure a degree of quality. I'm guessing you haven't had trouble. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah. You have to have those relationships, and you have to be using a contractor that has those relationships. And I think one of our questions coming up has a lot to do with hiring the right contractor for a pretty good house or a high performance house, and how challenging that can be, especially if you're trying to keep the price down.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. More on the subject of PV utility credits. I'll be honest, I had no idea it was so expensive to be connected just to the utility grid on the electric side. He says I'm sorry, this comes from, I'll have that in the podcast notes. Forgive me, I don't have this emailer's name. Hey, podcast crew, a few responses to the recent topics on PV. Utility credits. I'm in upstate New York with PV, and when the system is providing a surplus, I'm granted kilowatt hour credits to be used up to 5 years later. These credits cannot go towards the taxes and our participation fees. In the summer, I'm paying the utility $32.37 per month to remain connected to the grid. I'm charged a basic service of $17.33, a customer benefit contribution of $14.40, which is based on the size of my PV system at $1.18 per kilowatt hour. Finally, a tariff surcharge of 64 cents. Brian, do you have similar fees on your electric bill? I mean, you haven't been making PV for very long, but I haven't paid attention to mine.
Well, I haven't paid attention to the exact fees, but I know that I have had a bill with a cash credit on it. So in the way I think that different. This is a state by state. Most of the time, these are state by state laws in terms of how net metering is done, or what we have here in Connecticut is I forget the exact name of it because it's some jargony kind of thing, but it's like a buyback tariff or something like that. Basically, we're not. It's not net metering. We pay for what we use, and the utility has to buy from us what we produce. Therefore, it becomes a balance of dollars. And so you can either have you will either at the end of the month owe them money, or they will owe you money. I mean, I guess it could land on zero, but that's unlikely. More likely that you've used more of their power, and so you therefore will have a bill, money that you owe, or you've produced more than you owe, and therefore you'll have a dollar amount credit on your bill. So I'm assuming, since I've had a credit and nothing to pay, and they've owed me, that the credit does pay for whatever
Taxes
our fees
and stuff.
are.
Yeah,
taxes and fees.
Well, if y'all have experience with this subject, I'd love to hear more about it, especially if you're in, a long time PV connected or utility connected PV system. I'd love to hear about what you've paid over the long period of time. That would be interesting. Excuse me. That email came from John from Cazenovia, New York, which is near Syracuse. He wrote another part of his email that I'm going to postulate to listeners because I have no idea. He writes, one of my coworkers just received a water bill for the usage of 76,000 gallons of water over the past 3 months for a household of 2. They did a toilet dye test, and the toilets did not appear to be leaking. When no water is in use, the meter accurately reads zero flow. Any suggestions on where all this water is going and where to look for a leak? Is it possible it's just a broken meter? Thanks for all you do. I always look forward to the topics you all cover. So my parents' house, when I was, I'm guessing, a teenager, because I ended up digging the trench to the water main out in the street, started leaking, and it was leaking before the meter. Now, they weren't billed for that water because it wasn't being registered on the meter, and if John's friend isn't registering any flow, how the heck are they recording this water consumption unless the meter is broken and is just reading at a much higher flow rate than is actually moving through it? This is clearly, at least in my mind, a utility problem, and right? Am I missing something here?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The municipality that I lived in New York State, they not where could be where John's friend lives. I don't know that. He's in Syracuse. I wasn't near Syracuse, but so what they were doing was expanding the water system and drilling new wells, and they needed to cover the cost of that. And a lot of people had the misconception that they were paying per gallon of water or per metered gallon of sewer system usage. And that wasn't really the case. What they were doing was they were taking the cost of the system expansion and dividing it out equally amongst all of the rate paying customers. So if you looked at your bill, it may have looked like you were being charged for 76,000 gallons of water, but what you were really being charged was your percentage of the cost of the new system work. And it took a lot of uproar before they explained that to people, and they actually had a town meeting where they explained the water bill to people, that though it looks like your electric bill, you shouldn't always read it like it's your electric bill. So they may be getting charged a higher fee for some type of service work or expansion work that, unless you're involved in your municipality and are going to dry, boring meetings every month to find out these things.
But it's the water authority. How can it be dry, boring?
Right, or reading whatever arcane note that they put up in the dusty corner of a library you didn't even know was in your town. You may not know these things. So that's my past experience with it. Our sewer metering, it's every sewer bill that I got when I lived in New York said that we used 100,000 gallons of sewer, which was just a random number that they put on there to charge us $120 a quarter or whatever it was for our sewer usage.
That would seem an easy thing to prevent the miscommunication associated with that. Maybe including a note in the bill saying what the heck the giant fees are for, right? It's like,
well, it's the same. I think that's the same process that often happens with electric utilities. The utility, goes to the state bodies and the state governments, and they say we need this much revenue to do these, to fulfill these projects. So we want to increase everyone's rates this much because it'll bring in that revenue over the course of this year, and then we'll revisit rates once these projects are done. So they're literally adjusting our rates so that they have the money to do the maintenance work or the expansion work or upgrade work that they need to get done.
And we're going to put extra pressure on.
I'm going to say
we're going to put extra pressure on the people skirting the system and having their own PV panels and trying to produce their own power. We're going to give them a tariff and a fee on the tariff and tax the tariff and the fee.
I'm going to push back a little bit because the utility went out and did a dye test. So they clearly must see some kind of situation going too that cannot be explained by, a rate increase owing to infrastructure. I'm going to tell John to get a 5-gallon pail, fill it at a hose bib with no other water running, record the meter reading before and after you do this, and see how much water it says you used when you fill a 5-gallon pail. And I think that's going to be a pretty conclusive test. Is it the meter or not? Other than that, I think Ian's suggestion is good, that maybe they're trying to pay for infrastructure upgrades, which, as I understand, is very commonplace in water utilities nationwide because the stuff is getting old.
Yep.
This comes from Doug in Colorado, one of our regular podcast listeners. Doug, thanks as always for writing in. Hi, Patrick. I thought you might find this story interesting. It's about a 2023 Liberty High School graduate, Victoria Turner, who just bought a house that she helped build with her construction class. She is currently working as a roofer. I will put the newspaper article that Doug sent to me, but I think it's pretty awesome. This young woman helped to buy a house for her family because she had worked on it, and she's apparently helping them make it more livable as we speak. Pretty awesome. All right, folks, so this next email question comes from John, and it's a long one, but it's super good, so I'm going to try and muddle my way through it. Apologies in advance for the long email. Patrick, you told us on a recent podcast you enjoy working on structural problems, so I thought you might appreciate this doozy. I'd never heard of structural lathe and plaster until I hired a structural engineer to help address a troubling situation with our house. We live in an 1860 wood frame townhouse in Cincinnati. The adjacent building is a 7-unit brick apartment that was built sometime around 1870. We don't know the exact years, but we know it was built after our house due to the window in our attic being partially covered up by their wall. Due to the L shape of our neighbor's building, the rear 15 feet of our sidewalk is exposed to the exterior. At some point, I expect many decades ago, the neighbor poured a concrete walkway approximately a foot above the grade of our stone foundation. Their walkway subsequently settled and cracked, creating a condition that has been pouring water directly against the base of our wall. After I pulled back the vinyl siding and cut out the corrugated metal siding and board sheathing, I discovered to my horror that the bottom foot or so of the studs are completely rotted out. I asked the structural engineer why our house hadn't completely collapsed, and he attributed it, tongue firmly in cheek, to the structural lathe and plaster. I had to laugh to keep myself from crying. Obviously, we won't continue relying on the lathe and plaster to hold up the house, but he explained that the forces of gravity are in fact being resisted by the compressive strength of the lathe and plaster, which is why the studs are able to float above the foundation. The engineer recommended that we pour a 2-foot deep concrete cap reinforced with rebar on top of the foundation to raise our sills above grade. We will then place a new sill plate and install new reinforcing studs from there. My question to all of you, especially Mike, sadly Mike's not on the show, but I'm sure he'll weigh in later because he always does. He's wondering if a permanent wood foundation would work in this situation. Obviously, regardless of the approach I use, wood versus concrete, we need to address the fact that the walkway is funneling water into our wall, so we'll be putting perforated drain pipe along the exterior, diverting water away from the house. Would a mini foundation wall approximately 2 feet tall made of pressure-treated 2x4s and sheathed in pressure-treated plywood be a suitable replacement for the concrete cap? The concrete cap will take approximately 50 bags of concrete, which falls out of my willingness to DIY zone. By contrast, the permanent wood foundation feels more manageable. What are your thoughts? We plan to reside the house, but we need to address the structural issues first. Thanks in advance for your insights. I've attached a couple of photos in case you have trouble picturing what structural lathe and plaster looks like. So in Cincinnati is where John is. So what do you guys think? Does it make sense to do a pressure-treated stud wall in this application instead of a concrete foundation cap?
I'm not sure that this is a DIY project, period.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the engineer's right in telling him to do some kind of concrete cap, because what you're trying to do is integrate the work that you're going to perform with the existing foundation. And I'll let Mike weigh into it further via email response someday, but I would be a little bit concerned about how clean of a job you're going to be able to do with a 2-foot tall PT wood foundation attached to your existing foundation. Whereas what the engineer is proposing with what I'm assuming is a rebar laden 2-foot cap, I think is a much better long-term solution, but the waterproofing is going to be similar in need for either of those options. I would just be concerned about your ability to do a good job in the long term with the pressure-treated wood foundation.
Brian, thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was looking at the photos, which I'm sure we will put some of on the landing page for the show. Looking at the photos, I wasn't sure. I guess my thoughts are the same as Ian's here. Like, it just seemed like you'd be working in pretty tight quarters to try to get all the details you need right for that, that sort of short permanent wood foundation that they're considering. Yes, you still need to waterproof the concrete, but it seems like, even just kind of working in that, forming and pouring the concrete in that little tight spot between that walkway and their existing wall is going to be an easier process than trying to, not only build this short stud wall, but also then waterproof and detail it really well. And now you have a subgrade connection between the permanent wood foundation and the existing concrete wall that has a water entry point. And maybe you can excavate deep enough to lap that with good waterproofing, but that's a detail that you're going to have to get right in this situation.
Yeah, that's a great point,
So
Brian, about that subgrade joint between dissimilar materials.
yeah. So yeah, I think I like the idea of pouring the concrete and connecting it in that way. Drainage is going to be key because if water's really dumping at this wall, it's going to find its way in no matter how good of a job you do. And he didn't say anything, I don't think, about what's inside this basement area, but definitely you're going to go to all this work. You want to make sure that you have some plan for drainage. And then just a comment on the structural lath and plaster. I've been, every time I do significant demo, I am blown away at how strong buildings are the way we build them. Like, their buildings are so resilient. I've seen half staircases somehow staying together and being able, you can still traverse them when they seem like they should be, falling to the ground. And, just doing demo work, it always kind of, gives me insight into how resilient and maybe redundant the structural forces on our buildings are. So not to discredit anything. I mean, drywall is adding some rigidity to a wall. You can punch a hole through it with little effort, but it's adding some rigidity.
Yeah, I mentioned to you guys in the pre-show that astute listeners to me on the podcast are hopefully sitting down as I say this, but I applaud that structural engineer for thinking about the lath and plaster as something adding structure to it, not having some narrow view of, oh my God, how can a building not laden with steel portal frames still be standing without the benefit of my years of education to think through that. Like, hey, all this stuff nailed to the studs is doing something. It's contributing to the structure of it. And like Brian said, people who do this work for a living, especially in the remodeling world, have seen all kinds of stuff that shouldn't be standing, but yet it is.
There were houses like John's that I worked on in my career at Habitat, and you say to yourself, like, how is this working at all? But somehow it does. A board sheathing or sheathing of any type, of course, helps this wall resist bending in the middle, sagging, I guess, sinking. Anyway, so I'm going to be the third to jump on and say you need a concrete pad. And if for no other reason, it's between your house and a 7-unit apartment building. You have no idea what someone's going to do later and run into your house with a skid steer loader or a garbage truck or whatever it is. And I agree with mixing 45 bags of concrete is crazy. I would get a concrete mixer or one of my building knowledge friends, it's a Facebook group I belong to, recommended a metered concrete truck, which is used for small batches, and it actually mixes the dry ingredients on site and combines it with water to make you a load of ready mix concrete. Even if you have to pay a short load fee, near as I can tell, it's going to cost between $550 and $2,000 at the outset, and just the sheer amount of labor that's going to save you. And I'm going to disagree with Ian. I think this could be a DIY project for the right person. You, of course, want to shore up the house to make sure you're not going to get crushed, and you need to do the water management, of course. But, it's a lot of labor. And maybe you hire someone to do the shoring and foundation cap and then build the stud wall that's going to inevitably be built on top. So I'm not going to go as far as to say it shouldn't be done, but I'm going to say get a concrete mixer to bring you ready mix and plan other work if you're paying for a short load. I can't imagine there's not some other place in this old house that could use a new concrete pad that might use a yard or two of concrete and would save you. I mean, you're already paying for it, so you might as well use it somewhere. What do you think,
or see
guys?
if your neighbors have any spots where they could use some concrete. Get a few people within a couple 100 feet of each other together to try and use that load. One of the things I think about with projects like this is that there are foundation repair companies that do this type of work every day. And to to try and do something this technically advanced yourself is something that I would caution against unless you're really a very capable DIYer.
I asked John about roof and floor load, which are obviously very important things to consider here because you can make your house fall down. Commonly, this is on a gable end, even though the house has a relatively flat roof. But it does have floor load on it because the floor joists, as is the case in old houses, they don't follow convention. Oftentimes, they run perpendicular to the roof rafters, so they definitely have floor load on this exterior wall. So you could get yourself in trouble for sure.
Hey, I just want to take an informal poll and ask the three of you, what's the limit for mixing bags of concrete in a wheelbarrow for you?
I've done 60.
60?
I've done 60 in the basement of Vassar Hospital, pouring mechanical pads where we could have gotten a truck there, but it just, the stars didn't align. So we got an entire pallet of 80-pound sacks of concrete and did 60 of them in a wheelbarrow.
No mixer even. You didn't have a portable mixer.
Nope. It was an incredibly tight, hot space, and I don't even think we did it in a wheelbarrow. I think we did it in a mortar pan with a mortar hoe on the floor.
Well, it's good you were getting an hourly wage because I'm guessing that took a day.
I was getting an excellent hourly wage, as a matter of fact, as a member of a trade union, so it didn't bug me.
Well, let me reframe the question then, Ian. How many would you do if you weren't getting paid?
I think 20. That's probably about the top.
Yeah.
I watched a guy on YouTube. It's a YouTube mechanic that I watch. He's a Californian that moved to the wilds of New Hampshire, and his name is Waldo. And he recently put a 2-post lift in his dirt-floored shed for working on cars. And I think he mixed 60 bags of concrete by hand with his, I think it was a friend or his dad. I'm just like, oh, that is crazy.
Wow.
The problem, Brian, is that like 10 doesn't really get you anything. So
Right.
to do anything of size, you're at a minimum of 20. I always get a kick out of people who are trying to figure out what the yield on one of those sacks of concrete mix is. And it's like, well, just look at it. That's the yield.
Yeah.
I did that size.
I looked it up. It's 45 80-pound bags to make a yard of concrete. So, he's almost at the yard range, and you should have extra if you order ready mix, because running out, I can tell you, is a big drag. And, save yourself so much labor. I think, to answer your question, Brian, I would say 20 bags. I've done that many for deck piers.
And small pads, yeah. I think that's probably where I am too.
Yeah, I'm thinking like something about the size of a generator pad. Like that's about it, right? And that would maybe be 20.
Good question, though. And I hope, John, you'll keep us posted on your repairs there. It's a beautiful home. I think it's super cool looking. This comes from Jim. Gents, I think we agree most homes are not built today with sound building science considerations in mind. My observation is builders build how they were taught, and many do that work very well. But a 50-year-old builder is building like they built 25 years ago. At least this is the majority of home builders I've interviewed. This poses a dilemma for a homeowner looking to build a high-performing, pretty good style home. This is especially true in areas where builders are in short supply. My wife and I are in this situation presently. We found a builder we like who is available. As far as we can tell, he's trustworthy and recommended by many people. He is old school, meaning he thinks new insulation codes are overkill and triple pane windows are a ripoff, etc. On the plus side, he says he's willing to try new things, and it is a family business with most trades employed by his company. We've had a floor plan and elevations drawn. We don't want to do the framing plans because we want to have a house that performs well with properly designed and executed control layers. So we'd like to have the envelope, foundation, etc., and related materials specified and agreed upon with the builder before construction plans are drawn. Here's my question. When a homeowner works with a builder who doesn't think about high performance like you do, but is willing to learn, where do you start and how far do you take it? In other words, if you're not trying to build a passive house, but there are things the builder and his team can learn and do that are probably not too different from their approach, should you make them? What's the best approach here? Where do you put the focus? What resources do we reference for them to learn? I can't teach them and I'm an idiot. Do I offer to send them to Fine Homebuilding University and pay for his access and courses? Yes. Get him a copy of Pretty Good House? This is our last and final build, and we want to get it right. Then who draws the detailed construction plans? Do I hire a consultant to design and draw the detailed assemblies? Is there a resource where the builder and I can jointly choose wall and roof assemblies and how they attach to each other? How do I have the construction plans done that my guy can build from that resource? To be honest, I feel like it shouldn't be this hard. Do I just buy a camper and be done with it? Maybe we just live in the barn that's already on the site. Love the show. Jim from Charlevoix, Michigan. It's in the upper peninsula of Michigan, y'all, halfway between Traverse City and Mackinac City, which is closer to Canada than the lower 48, I would add. I'm going to let you go first, Ian. What do you think? You are a builder that I would describe as someone or a type of company that Jim is looking for.
He's doing things in the wrong order. You have to design it first. You have to get those details done first, and then the details should drive what the builder's doing. He and the builder should not be coming up with details or deciding what assemblies should look like. I think he needs to have the majority of the at least envelope designed, and whether or not that's designed by a home designer with some level of high performance knowledge, or if he's going to build a very basic house and then he's going to go through, and maybe it's one of Joe Stiebrick's books about building in cold weather climates, pick an assembly out of there, show it to your guy and go, this is what I want. Can you produce this? If you give them the choice to revert back to the way they like to do things, they're going to. That's just the way builders work. We're a risk-averse bunch for very good reason. I think he talks in there a little bit about doing things the way you've done them for 25 years. And the reason people do that is when you do something for 25 years and you don't go broke doing it, you continue doing it. There's no upside to taking on more risk, right? Like the upside maybe is you learn some stuff and you make a little bit more money, but the downside is your life becomes a country song where you lose your house and your dog and your wife and all that stuff and go broke. So we're by nature a risk-averse bunch, but I think he and the builder should not be deciding on the details, especially if neither of them are experienced. Pick something that works in your climate zone and go from there. I think he needs a design professional first.
Brian, your thoughts?
Can I go with move into the van and live in the barn? That was an option, right?
That was an option.
I'm leaning that way too.
Hashtag van life.
Well, of course, I agree with Ian. Two people, like one aspirational homeowner and one unknowledgeable builder don't make a great team for building a high performance home without someone who actually knows how to do it. And so whether or not this is the right builder, if they're truly willing to try new things, that's great. Get the project designed, ask the builder to, have performance goals. Make sure the builder understands them, have a plan for verifying things with blower doors and thermal imaging and stuff like that. Make sure the builder understands that. But also, as I listened to you read this question, Patrick, one of the things I thought was, it's actually it doesn't have to be as complicated as maybe they're making it sound, right? If the builders built a stud wall before, can the builder build two of them? Well, and they can build high performance walls if if they have a good cellulose installer that can blow cellulose, dense pack cellulose properly into a 2x6 wall. They can do a double stud wall. So it doesn't have to be all that complex. Maybe triple pane European windows install a little bit differently, but maybe they actually install a little bit easier too in some ways, right? Those turbo screws that they come with and the clips that make installation pretty easy. Maybe it's not all that complex if you just kind of take a deep breath as the builder anyway, who's never done this, you just kind of take a deep breath and realize, oh, this is not, maybe the scary thing here is meeting these performance goals and these expectations, not actually doing the work. There's some, of course, if they don't understand air barrier continuity, it's something they're going to have to learn, but it's not all that complicated. Read a few articles and you'll understand that you need to just know how the air barrier connects around all six sides of the building. The information's out there. It's not, and it's just not, like Andy Engel's blog was called, it's on Green Building Advisor, was called, "It's Not That Hard."
Yep. He would be delighted to hear us mention that. I am sure. That's fantastic. I'm going to say the Green Building Advisor is your resource for finding these construction details to build a pretty good house. And it would not be a bad idea to buy the Pretty Good House book for your builder, so at least they have some familiarity with what they're trying to do as an entry level. They might decide they don't want to do this project. They might decide it's going to be really easy, as Brian suggests. So, I think don't discount this builder who's got a good reputation and is willing to try new stuff. Especially, I think that's the person you want. You want someone who's open-minded, who's not going to just say, "This is all hooey, I'm not doing it." And that person, if you're trying to get them to drink from the high-performance building fountain, they're going to be it's going to be a struggle the whole time. Andres, what do you think about this? How would you go about building a pretty good house if charged with that responsibility?
I think I would search in Green Building Advisor for someone local, like maybe Ben Bogie, someone like that. We are pretty close to him, so it's easier for us. But some people, of course, don't have access to builders like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There are plenty of designers, however, or builders that you could hire, from a distance to design the assemblies for that climate. They're out there and they'll take your money and design a great house for you. So that just maybe needs to be, like Ian said, the design's got to come first. That's got to be part of the process. It maybe doesn't hurt. Surely doesn't hurt to include the builder in the process. But if it's a builder who's not done this before, they shouldn't be making all the decisions on their own.
And one thing that's really, really important is if we could put these words in bold and underline them, Brian, for your climate is hugely important in what you said. It's very easy for novices to go on to Green Building Advisor and get really enamored with products and methods and assemblies that frankly just will not work for their climate zone. And you get an inexperienced builder and somebody who does not have the knowledge and how to apply what they're reading, and you can have a real disaster build if you're trying to use methodology that's better off for the American Southwest or the Northwest when you're trying to do something in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which might as well be building on the North Pole for the heat and the cold you're going to get up there.
Wind, name it.
Yeah.
I had one other suggestion, and it's maybe too far afield, but I recently worked with Josh Salinger on a panelization feature article for Fine Homebuilding. And briefly, what these companies do is they, in most cases, build high performance, super insulated houses that they will ship on a truck as panels, and you put them up on your site. And it might be a good thing to explore for Jim, who's in a rural area. The caveat I would say with this is, by all accounts, it gets kind of expensive if you have to build a house any distance from the factory where these panels are produced. So oftentimes, any savings from the efficiency of off-site construction methods, which we've all been promised are going to save us money and result in more efficient home building in this country, it evaporates with the trucking of this house to the job site. So there's some caveats with that, but it seems like a pretty reliable way to get a super high performance house because they've mass produced it or made it less boutique-y, I guess is the more accurate way to describe it.
Yeah, I had the same thought about something like a Unity Home or one of the ones. Yeah, any of those could certainly do it. Maybe he could get new frameworks to ship him some straw bale panels. That's not terribly far from Vermont. It's 2 states closer than Unity Homes is.
Can you imagine what John's builder is going to say about the straw bale constructed high performance home? I'm guessing he's going to be skeptical.
Run in the opposite direction.
Jim's builder is going to run the opposite direction. Yeah, I don't know. That's
I guess I was just going to say, one thing we haven't mentioned is, simplicity is your friend, I think.
Yep.
It can be exponentially more challenging to build a complex high performance home than a simple one. Quick example that comes to mind is your roof assembly. It's much easier to get an airtight
ceiling
and super insulated ceiling than roof plane. So keeping it simple will save costs and complexity. Hey, if that's not your dream home, then you have to, it's not a simple home. Yep. Then you have to consider that and weigh those things. But I think it's valid that and true that the simpler you keep it, the more affordable high performance becomes, and the more buildable it becomes.
Yeah, I think people don't like to hear us say that, Brian, when we talk about that we built very simple rectangular shaped homes, and now we've, in addition, both outed ourselves as having home center plywood kitchens. It's not what captures people's imagination when they think about building their dream home. But yet, if you're going to do it outside the system of that we have for home delivery in this country, especially a custom home, that's where you're going to go affordably. Anything that's a custom home is going to cost you what many people would consider to be an exorbitant amount of money.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. May I offer that? Home building is not easy. If everyone could do it, it would be cheap. I want to plug the after show, which is based on a podcast email we got. It's from Neil. It's about the viability of a home maintenance and repair business. This is something we've talked about on the podcast in previous shows, but can you make a living, and what kind of person would be ideal for making a living, taking care of the normal things, changing furnace filters, cleaning gutters, small repairs, or learning homeowners to, you might want to address the new furnace, in a few years or next year, or you might need a new water heater soon, all these things. So we're going to talk about that in the after show. We have one time for one. Go ahead.
I'm locked and loaded with my usually polarizing opinions about the home handyman industry.
Well, that's why we have you on the show, which is fantastic. I'm glad you're ready. We have time for a quick question, and we do have to keep it brief, but this one comes from Tom. Hey there, podcasters. All access subscriber here. Great show, and I finally have something to ask. I'm not on the roof often, but each spring and fall I end up walking the perimeter every weekend for a month, blowing leaves, twigs, and crap out of the gutters. Oak trees are just messy. I'm over 60 now and can't really scamper around the roof like I did years ago. I really don't feel confident in my regular sneakers. Do you have suggestions for grippier options for footwear? Tom, first off, I suggest maybe you hire someone to clean the gutters or put on ground gutters. But short of that, there is a special type of shoe called Cougar Paws meant for navigating roofs, and I hear they even work on slippery roofs like metal. Do you guys have another suggestion? I've always found running shoes work pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of people I know have running shoes, but for my entire career in the field, I always wore Red Wing boots, and when I purchased them or chose them as they changed their styles, I always paid particular attention to the flexibility of the lugs on the sole, and I found the soles of boots that you can't actually get any flexibility out of to be very slippery on roof surfaces, but ones that have a bit more flexibility. Granted, they will wear much faster, but they will give you a much better secure grip on roof surfaces.
What did you do, Brian, on your build?
Well, I agree with you, Patrick. I mean, every time I've gone on roofs, I felt most comfortable in sneakers. I've always felt like that's at least on common asphalt shingle roofs, that's what I felt the most comfortable on. But for me, there's just always a place where I feel comfortable on a roof and where I don't, and where it requires either not getting on the roof, working from a ladder because it's too steep for me, or having fall protection. But I'm willing to get on roofs, but I'm also no daredevil. So there's a point where I just don't do it. And maybe if you're not comfortable in a dangerous situation, probably best to maybe not think that footwear is the solution, but maybe time to let someone else do it. Like you said, Patrick, better safe than sorry.
At a minimum, Tom, put a permanent anchor up on top of the roof for a lifeline and wear a harness. They're not expensive anymore. They used to be, but you can buy them on Amazon for under $100. So it might be worth it.
Yeah.
A fall is going to ruin your life. Literally, it does ruin your life. Well, thank you all for being here. It was fun. I think it was a good show. We had good questions, and I want to thank our listeners for that, because it's you all that make our show better. Thank you. See you guys at the after show. You going to be here? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll come back for it.
Andres, thanks for coming back and doing the show. The first minute on the clock again. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Ian, Brian, and Andres for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Thank you very much for listening.